everyone, welcome back to ASMR Molly Pelly. I just got out of the shower. My hair is still wet and air drying, but it has been a minute since we have read After Hello. So I thought I would read a little bit for you today. We're about halfway. So yeah, let's get started. We can tilt this down a little. No, you can't see it. Oh, we put up our Christmas tree today. We have like chairs blocking it off because my baby likes to pull the ornaments off. So that's fun. Okay. Chapter 24, Sam. Sam looked up as Rebecca returned to the living room, picking up her plate from the kitchen on her way. He glanced back to the bathroom door still closed. She's fine, Rebecca said over her shoulder, a smile on her face. She sat on the couch next to Jen and kicked off her sandals. You can stop worrying. Sam's chopsticks clattered together as he fumbled and dropped a bite of food. Rebecca and Jen exchanged a look and a small laugh. What's so funny? Will asked. Boys, Rebecca said, and Jen rolled her eyes in agreement. A few minutes later, Sarah emerged from the bathroom, the cuffs on her jeans rolled up to her ankles. She tugged at the hem of her shirt and she took her place on the couch again. Thanks, she said to Sam in a low voice. She flicked a glance at Paul, who was in the kitchen scooping up another serving of chicken and rice. What did I miss? Sam shook his head. I told him what had happened with Piper and how and why, and we came to an understanding. What kind of understanding? He won't bring it up if you don't. Sarah zipped her finger and thumb across her lips, consider it not brought up then. Sam reached for her plate of food. Are you still hungry? I can warm this up for you if you want. She whipped it off. No thanks. So Jen, Will said, scraping together the last bite of curry on his plate. What's your story? Will, Rebecca said, glaring at him. What? He blinked in innocent surprise. A girl as pretty as Jen has got to have an interesting story, he grinned. What can I say? I'm interested. Rebecca nudged Jen with her elbow. Feel free to ignore him. Jen adjusted her glasses. I'm afraid my story isn't that interesting, Becca, and I went to school together back in Ohio. She convinced me to move here and even helped me find a place to stay. Paul and Sam helped me move in last month. No wonder we haven't met yet, Will said. Though I am a little surprised Paul didn't tell me he had a beautiful new neighbor. I thought we were better friends, he called over his shoulder to Paul, who rolled his eyes. Jen blushed and cleared her throat. Becca's told me a little bit about Piper. She sounds like a terrible person. At the sound of Piper's name, Paul dropped the serving spoon with a clatter. Everyone turned to look at him, but he reserved his glare for Sarah. It wasn't me, she whispered to Sam. I didn't bring it up. You heard me not bring it up. Sam cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention away from Paul and Sarah. Jen, did you know Will is a huge soccer fan? She sat up a little straighter. Really? Never miss a match, Will bloated. No, Will boasted. Will boasted. Rebecca groaned. Count me out of this conversation. She took her plate to the kitchen and started helping Paul put away the leftovers. Will seized the opening and took her place on the couch. A girl who likes green curry and soccer. Where have you been my whole life? Jen laughed and looked down, but she didn't move away when Will stretched his arm across the back of the couch and leaned closer. Sam tapped Sarah's leg and gestured for her to follow him, edging away from Will and Jen and giving Paul and Rebecca an equally wide berth. They ended up by the the still open window. The sun had mostly set and the sky was cooling into lavender and blue. The air was warm and comfortable. Sarah leaned toward the window, a soft breeze stirring her hair. "Would you like to go outside?" he asked, nodding to the fire escape landing that was on the other side of the window. "Can we?" In answer, he opened the window a little wider and stepped out. She grinned and climbed out after him. She gripped the rail and turned her face to the sky. The sound of cars and people and music blended together and rose up to meet them, surrounding them with an almost tangible energy. He leaned back against the slanted fire escape ladder and watched her watch the city. "I love it here," she said with a sigh. "I can tell. You are so lucky to be able to live here. Most days it doesn't feel like luck." She tilted her head at him, jutting out her hip. "What about today?" He liked how she looked, standing there in her dark red t-shirt and borrowed jeans. She looked like she was on the prow of a ship, ready to sail away, ready to face anything. She wore the same look on her face as she had when he'd first seen her outside the bookstore. Had it only been that morning? It felt like a lifetime ago. But now he knew what it meant. Sarah was ready for an adventure. "Today," he said, watching her face, "today feels like luck." Her smile lit up her eyes, and he felt a matching spark of light come to life inside of him. "You know," she said, turning around and leaning her elbows against the railing, "you still owe me a story." "I do." The long-promised but never delivered story of Vanessa and the pirate map. "You said you'd tell it to me over dinner, remember?" Sam leaned his head back. "Ah, yes, I remember." But he shrugged. "Dinner's over. Guess you missed your chance." "Sorry, that's my ice maker. Hope it's not too distracting." "That's not fair," she protested with a laugh. He laughed with her, and the spark of light grew a little warmer. "Hang on, I'll tell it. We made a deal, and I always keep my word." She settled back, attentive and eager. "So you and Vanessa had a pirate map," she prompted. Actually, Vanessa didn't have the pirate map, but she did have something to trade. Sam sat on a step of the ladder, hooking his heels over the edge of the step below him. I'd had my eye on this item for a long time, but Vanessa had never been willing to let it go until now. What was it? A ticket stub from when the Beatles played at City Park Stadium in New Orleans in 1964. Her eyes opened wide. "Wow." "I know. After my friend told me Vanessa was ready to trade, I headed to her studio as fast as I could. I had a necklace I knew she wanted, so we made a deal. I left ticket in hand. From there, I headed straight to the law offices of Durham and Little, where Mr. Little himself traded me his pirate map in exchange for the Beatles ticket." "You got a pirate map from a lawyer?" Sarah threw back her head and laughed, her happiness moving along the smooth column of her throat. "Ironic, I know. Where did he get the map?" "I didn't ask. Besides, you know you can't trust lawyers. Some people say they're almost as bad as pirates." Sarah laughed again, a bright, happy sound. Sam had to look away. So Vanessa traded away a priceless piece of Beatlemania for a necklace? That doesn't seem like a fair trade. It may not seem fair to you, but it doesn't have to. It only has to be fair to the person doing the trading. It's about what you're willing to give up in order to get what you want. For Vanessa, the necklace was more important to her than some old piece of paper with the Beatles' name printed on it. Sam shrugged and tucked his hand into his pockets, and sometimes it's about sacrifice. Giving up more so that the other person can get what they need. Vanessa knew she needed that ticket in order to get the map, and I needed the map to finish the job. She traded with me in part to help me. Sarah swallowed hard, and the laugh lines along her mouth and throat disappeared. She turned away from Sam and looked back up at the night sky. He watched a ripple of tension move through her body, down her neck, through her shoulders, past her hips and legs. Clearly, something he'd said had struck a nerve. I wondered if he should ask her what was wrong. He wondered what she would say if he did. Sarah, chapter 25. Sacrifice. Sam's words echoed in my mind, giving up more so that the other person can get what they need. I had been trying hard not to think of that night when my mom left, but after my conversation with my dad, I couldn't seem to stop thinking about it. Now another memory surfaced, my mom's voice saying, "I feel like I'm the only one giving anything in this relationship. Why couldn't you at least meet me halfway?" What had my mom needed that my dad hadn't been able to give? Was that why she left? Was that why he'd let her go? If they'd been able to meet halfway, would they still be together? I shuddered again, gathering up those dark thoughts and shoving them away. "Sarah," Sam's voice was close to my ear, and I turned quickly to see him standing next to me at the railing. I hadn't heard him move, but then he was good at that. "That's an awesome story," I said, "thanks." Concern furrowed his forehead as his eyes searched mine, as though he could trace the path of pain that wound throughout me. His lips parted, a question ready to come to life on his breath. I knew what he was going to ask, and I didn't want to go there. Not right now. "Vanessa sounds like a cool lady." I shifted away from Sam. A shiver took me, but I chalked it up to the night air and nothing else. I didn't want it to be anything else. He tapped his fingers on the rail between us. "She is. You'd like her. I think you guys would have a lot in common. Because my life is full of zombies and dark magic, right?" I offered up a lopsided smile, but he didn't take the bait. "Because you've both left something behind you love." I gasped, feeling like I was teetering on a ledge ready to fall. Sam pretended not to notice. My neck hurts. Sam pretended not to notice. Though I knew he noticed everything. Vanessa may live in New York. She may even like living in Soho, but her heart is still in New Orleans. Always will be. He looked down at his hands, touching his thumbnails together. She left her home, and she's been looking for a way back ever since. The gasp I had swallowed turned to ice in my stomach. Why doesn't she just move back then? Why does she stay here? Sam looked at me, his brown eyes almost black in the shadows. "Because you can never go back. You can only go forward." He shrugged. "Maybe her path will loop her back to where she started, but for now she's here. And for what it's worth, I think she's happy. Happy here. Even without her heart. Happiness can be close by, even if your heart is far away." I felt like our conversation was suddenly as precarious as the landing beneath my feet. It looked solid enough, but there were dangerous gaps between the rails, places where uncertain feet or unspoken words could slide through. "I don't know if I can believe that," I said quietly. "Then don't," Sam said with an equally quiet shrug. "You don't have to believe in happiness for it to exist." I clasped my hands together and let them dangle over the edge of the railing. When my mom had left, she had taken a part of my heart with her, and the hole she had left behind had only grown wider and deeper over the years. I kept trying to fill it with happiness, but it never seemed to be enough. "I believe that happiness is always there," Sam continued, looking up and away at the faint stars struggling to peek through the night. "That's why we have to keep looking for it, because we can't always see it." "And is that why we have to find it? Because it doesn't always find us?" He turned to me, the light reflecting like stars in his eyes. "Sometimes it does, though, even when we aren't looking for it." Another shiver ran through me, but this time it was a warm wave that traveled from the top of my head all the way down to the tips of my fingers and my toes. I tried to take a breath, but I couldn't seem to convince my lungs to work, and what little air I managed to inhale smelled like Sam. I suddenly remembered holding his hand in the elevator to Piper's place. The brush of his thumb against my cheek, the pressure of his fingers on my leg. My skin tingled everywhere he had touched me today. A sharp prickling like my body was waking up from numbness. Maybe Vanessa could make us a voodoo doll of Piper that we could poke with pins until she gave Paul his job back. I said it as a joke, hoping to bring the conversation back to safer ground, and I'll admit, to make Sam smile. It worked. His lips pulled upward and a quick chuckle escaped. I felt like I could breathe again, like I had been released. He slouched against the railing, his attention shifting away from me, diffusing in intensity, but not entirely disappearing. You want to resort to black magic to complete your quest. That doesn't seem very noble. Nobility is overrated. Piper made this personal. I'm out to win. Winning is overrated, Sam countered. Said by the boy who wins all the time. I rolled my eyes good-naturedly. I was glad to be back on familiar ground, joking and teasing with Sam. His earlier intensity and seriousness made me feel unsettled. I didn't know what to do with my emotions. Okay, so maybe the voodoo doll isn't the way to go, I said, feeling my way back through a new idea. But what if we've been looking at Piper's request all wrong? What do you mean? We've been looking for something we could frame and hang on the wall. Art or sheet music, right? We've been looking for something local, or at least we've been talking to people you know, like Daniel and Anxis. But what if what will make Piper happy isn't artwork at all? What if it's something else? And she never said it had to be from New York. Are you saying you want to go to Jersey? He asked, his humor laced with disbelief. I waved my hands in front of me, the idea continuing to crystallize in my mind. No, I'm wondering if you think Vanessa has one of those elaborate masks people wear during Mardi Gras. You've been to Mardi Gras? Sam asked with raised eyebrows. No, but I watch TV. He nodded, granting me a point, and then cocked his head in thought for a moment. It's not a bad idea. Are you kidding? It's a great idea. I grinned, elated. I pushed away from the railing and gestured as the words spilled out of me. Piper said she wanted something bold and unexpected, right? Well, there's no way she'll be expecting this. If it had some of those fancy sparkling crystals on it, and oh, maybe we could find one with hot pink feathers, and I stopped at the look on Sam's face. What does that look for? He held my eyes with his and didn't let go. The lines in his face softened as his earlier smile returned, but this time with an unexpected shyness. I was just thinking that I've never met anyone like you before. Oh? I felt heat rise in my cheeks, and I was grateful for the cool night shadows. You're wrong about one thing, though, he went on. I am? I don't always win. I twisted my lips down. I seem to recall you saying that you can get whatever you want, so forgive me if I don't believe that. Sam shook his head, suddenly serious. I said I can find anything I need. That's a long way from getting whatever you want. I leaned against the metal ladder and looked at Sam out of the corner of my eye, with the glow of lights from the apartments around us and the streetlights below us. Sam's brown hair seemed closer to gold, but his eyes remained that warm chocolate brown. The play of light and shadow on his face made him look foreign and familiar at the same time. My heart picked up a step, and I swallowed. My mouth suddenly dry. The prickles returned to my fingers, my cheeks, my leg. So, what is it that you want? For a moment, his face was open and unguarded. I saw 1,000 answers pass through his eyes before he managed to control his expression. He took a step away from me. A bang on the window shattered my thoughts and made me jump. Hey, Will called out, knocking on the window again. If you two lovebirds are done out there, Paul says to come back in. I looked at Sam, but he was back to being all business. That vulnerability I'd seen and the closeness we'd shared was locked away. His fingers twitched on the railing, unsettled and unable to stay still. "We should go in," he said. His tone and his words clicked. "I'll call Vanessa about your mask idea. See if she has anything that we can use." He brushed past me, leaning down to step back into the apartment. I stood for one more moment on the landing, looking up at the sky above me and feeling the tingling spot on my body where our shoulders had touched. Sam, chapter 26. Sam stepped into the bedroom, the phone already at his ear, when he heard Sarah climbed back in through the window. As he listened to the ringing go unanswered on the other end, he pressed his back against the wall, grateful for the momentary isolation. It was a small apartment, and there were altogether too many people in it. Will and Jen were still on the couch talking, and Paul had flipped on the TV watching the news with a glazed expression. Rebecca was wiping down the kitchen counter. He reminded himself to thank her later for that as he closed the door to his room. The phone buzzed one more time in his ear, followed by a click, as Vanessa's voicemail picked up. "If you know who you're calling, then you know what to do." Her throaty voice purred on the recording. "Vanessa, yeah, it's Sam," he said after the beep. He quickly explained about the Mardi Gras mask, but didn't go into detail about why he needed it. "Call me back if you get this message tonight, okay? Doesn't matter what time, it's important." He hung up and shoved his phone back into his pocket. He scrubbed his hands through his hair. What was his problem? He thought back to that moment earlier in the day when he'd had the chance to walk away and didn't. It was too late to go back and change that moment, so the only thing to do was to take his own advice and move forward. But he wasn't sure moving forward with Sarah was a good idea. He'd seen her face out on the landing, and when she'd asked him what he wanted, he'd heard her unspoken words. What did he want? It was the easiest and the most complicated question in the world. He was being honest with himself. Then, at that moment, standing there on the landing with Sarah so close, there had only been one answer, and he knew she had seen it written all over his face. He shouldn't have taken that step forward toward her instead of away, or he should have taken that step forward toward her instead of away. But again, it was too late to go back and change it. Story of my life, he thought, a bitter taste in his mouth. Through the wall, he heard Sarah say something, followed by Rebecca's muted reply, and just the sound of her voice made him close his eyes, frustrated with himself. What was it about her that made him feel like he could say whatever was on his mind to her, and why did he suddenly have so much to say? 18 months he'd lived here with Paul. 18 months he'd worked in the city and wandered the streets looking and searching and finding. He'd been from the Battery Park to Washington Heights and all points in between. He'd met all kinds of people, but no one in all that time and in all those places had clicked with him the way Sarah had. Was it because he knew that she was literally here today and gone tomorrow? Did knowing she was just passing through make it easier to trust her? Was he giving her bits of his story, his past, so that when she left, she would take them with her? He drew in a slow, deep breath. He pulled his hands away from his head, his face, and concentrated on stopping the trembling in his fingers. "Don't look back. Gotta keep moving." "Rebecca," Sarah's voice was clear, close to the door to his room. "I just wanted to say thanks for being so nice to me." He cocked his head, listening, hating the lift he felt in his chest, knowing she was just on the other side of the wall. "What's this?" Rebecca's voice wasn't as close, but it was still as clear. "It's a coupon for a free manicure at Knives and Nails. I know it's not much, but you don't need to give me anything. Honest, I can't take this." "Then don't take it," Sarah said. "Trade me for it." Rebecca laughed. "Sam has you trading now." Sam rolled from his back to his shoulder and pressed his ear closer to the wall. "Maybe," Sarah's voice was a touch defiant. "I don't think I have anything to trade. Well, wait, let me see." Sam heard the faint sound of Rebecca rummaging in her purse, of keys clicking together. "Ah, here, what about this?" Rebecca asked. There was a brief pause. Then Sarah said, "You're sure you want to trade that for a free manicure at the best salon in the city?" "You bet. But it's so pretty." "It's not really my style." "Okay, if you're sure. Thanks." "You already said that." Rebecca's voice held a smile. "I still mean it," Sarah said. "Hey, Paul," Rebecca called out. "Where did Sam go? He didn't leave, did he?" Sam stepped back from the wall and ran his hand through his hair one more time. He opened the door and re-entered the living room. "Nope, still here." Sarah hurriedly shoved something in the pocket of her jeans. He offered her a curious look, but she didn't quite meet his eyes. "Good," Rebecca said. "I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye." She leaned in and kissed Sam on the cheek. "Take care of your brother for me, okay?" Sam glanced at Paul, who had leaned back in his chair, his eyes closed and his hands folded on his chest. "I will. And take care of Sarah, too. Make sure she gets home okay." Rebecca continued pulling Sarah in for a quick hug. She leaned close and spoke in a mock whisper. "And forget about Piper, sweetie. She's not worth your time." Sarah's eyes darted to Sam, and even though she said, "I know," he saw in them the determination that she would finish the job. "Jen," Rebecca called out, looping her purse over her shoulder. "It's late. Let's go." Jen didn't look up from where she and Will were kissing on the couch, but she waved a hand, indicating that she would be happy to be left behind. Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Oh, for the love of..." She crossed to the couch and yanked the back of Will's shirt. "She'll call you tomorrow." He coughed and rubbed at his throat. "Enough with the manhandling, Becky." Rebecca swatted him on the back of the head. Jen laughed, and the two friends swept out of the apartment with a final wave at Sam. Will scooped up the remote from the coffee table and stretched out on the couch with a grin that would have made the Cheshire cat jealous. "Well, aside from the whole losing my job thing, this turned out to be a pretty nice day." Sarah giggled behind her hand. Sam nudged her elbow with his. "Hey, so I had to leave a message at Vanessa's. Do you want to wait for her to call back, or..." She shook her head. "I promised my dad I'd check in with him in person once I was done with dinner. I don't suppose you want to come with me?" Her green eyes were bright with hope. "To meet your dad? That seems a little sudden." She narrowed her eyes in mock anger. "No, not to meet my dad. What? You don't think I'm good enough to meet your folks? Are you ashamed of me?" "Should I be?" she countered. "Not today." He looked over at Will, who had kicked off his shoes and was flipping through channels on the TV. "Hey, Will, Sarah and I need to run an errand. Keep an eye on Paul for me, okay?" Will waved the remote without breaking his gaze from the flickering lights. "Have fun. Don't get arrested." Sarah giggled again as Sam led her back to the front door. He was careful to match his steps to hers, careful to keep some distance between them. He had let himself get too close too quickly. He reminded himself that she wasn't going to be there in the morning. He still didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Sarah detoured into the bathroom to grab her bag and her sunglasses, and then at the door she paused, one hand on the doorknob, one hand on his arm. "Sam," she said, and he felt that lift in his chest again at the sound of his name. "Thanks." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, not daring to look at her hand on his arm, but acutely aware of it all the same. She smiled and slipped out the door into the hallway. He grabbed his bag from the hook by the door and slung it across his chest like it was a shield that could protect him before following her out. Sarah, Chapter 27. "Are you sure we're on the right subway?" I asked. I found the different colors and numbers and letters for the trains confusing, and was glad Sam was still my guide. I wondered how long it had taken him to master the intertwining transportation system. "We are if you still want to go to Times Square." Sam and I sat facing each other along the row of seats that lined the wall of the train. Our feet propped up on the middle seat between us, our toes and our knees almost touching. A handful of people were scattered in seats throughout the train, but most everyone else was listening to music or reading or sleeping. The bright fluorescent lights thought ran down the center of the ceiling cast a brightness over us that felt harsh and artificial. I don't mind going to Times Square, I said, absolutely folding and unfolding the frames of my sunglasses. You mind seeing your dad? Sam spun his Subway Metro card between his fingers. I mind having to check in with my dad, I clarified. I told him on the phone I was okay. It's like he only believes me when he wants to. Maybe he needs to see it to believe it, Sam said, with a shrug and a smile. He's your dad. He'll always worry about you. I grimaced. He said that on the phone, too. How'd his deal go? Did he say? Yeah, it's all good. Signed, sealed, and delivered. You don't sound that happy about it. I flipped my sunglasses over my hands, staring down at my reflection in the curved lens. No, I am. It's just that his business took up so much of his time. It dominated everything. Some days it was all we talked about. When we bothered to talk at all, I mean. Sam's fingers tapped against the side of the seat. Sounds like now that it's gone, you'll have more time to spend together. That's just it. Now that it's gone, what are we going to talk about? I looked out the darkened window. What if we don't have anything left to say? What if all we have is worry and silence and guilt? I nudged his toe with mine. It must be nice not to have your parents worry about you all the time. Are you kidding? All my parents do is worry about me. But they let you move to New York and stay with Paul. It was more like they were relieved when I said I wanted to move here and stay with Paul. They didn't want you at home anymore. My heart stung at the thought. I didn't want to be at home anymore. Sam looked out the window at the passing black walls of the tunnel. The worse things got at home, the more attractive the option of sending me away became. It's why I worked so hard to graduate early. Everything changed after the accident, and not for the better. I had to get out of that life. I had to get away. I curled my fingers around my sunglasses, hiding my reflection from sight. How bad did it get? Sam's hand reached for his throat, where the dog tags hung, hidden beneath his shirt. Bad. I was quiet for a moment. An automated voice announced the next stop. I hadn't told anyone the truth about that night, you know, Sam said, still staring out the window. A tiled wall appeared, the street name written in blue blocks and surrounded by green squares. I wasn't sure if Todd and Chris remembered what I had done, and there wasn't exactly a good way to ask. Jeremy was still in the hospital, so anyway, if I brought it up and they didn't remember, then what could I possibly say? And if they did remember, then I didn't want to risk bringing it up and making it worse. Besides, after a month or so, I figured if no one had said anything by then, they weren't going to. You didn't tell your parents? He met my gaze hard and didn't look away. Would you? I tried to imagine what it would be like to carry around a secret so big and so bad and not be able to tell anyone. People shuffled in and out of the train. The doors hissed, closed, and we continued through the underground. I think Todd and Chris remembered something. Maybe not everything, but they started avoiding me. They still hung out together, and once Jeremy was out of the hospital, they would go see him, but never with me. I remember I saw them at the mall once, but before I could say anything, I saw them see me, and they ducked into the nearest store so they wouldn't have to talk to me. Are you sure? Maybe they were. Somehow, I doubt they were shopping at the sales at the Baby Gap. Oh. The walls slid by almost silently. The black flickering passed like flame. Not flame film, but flickering past like film. I looked down at my hands, picking at my fingernails. That's why you wanted to get away. Because it's easier to be the one to leave instead of being the one left behind. Sam didn't say anything. Then he bumped my foot with his until I looked up at him. His eyes had lost the hard edge they had held and had softened in surprise. Yeah, he said, it is. I cleared my throat, hoping it would also clear my mind. Memories crowded in close. Mom and Dad singing together at my birthday party, Mom twirling, showing off a bright blue dress, her toenails painted to match. The sound of Dad mowing the lawn on a hot summer's evening. The rumbling of the motor suddenly transformed into the grating sounds of arguing, yelling. I always thought the brittle silence that followed a fight was somehow worse than all the noise. My thoughts and emotions knocked against each other like rocks and flint. I didn't know which one would be the spark that would ignite them all, but I could feel the pain coming. You know, you never told me about the medallion on your chain, I said, shoving my glasses into my bag. My fingers closed around my camera and I pulled it out almost on instinct. The understanding in Sam's eyes just about undid me. Clearly he knew a desperate evasion when he saw one. He didn't call me on it, for which I was profoundly grateful, and instead he pulled the chain free from his shirt, separating out the circular medallion from the oval dog tags. "It's St. Christopher," he said reverently. It was my grandpa's. He wore it while he was in the Navy during World War II. He died almost 5 years ago and left it to me in his will. St. Christopher is supposed to be good luck for travelers, right? Sam turned the metal circle over in his fingers before letting it drop to his chest, where it clanged against the dog tags. Supposed to be. I winced. Here I had been trying to avoid emotionally touchy subjects, and I had blundered headlong back into the worst one possible. "I think it's cool that you have something from your grandpa," I tried, hoping to steer the conversation to safer ground. "What was he like?" "He was amazing. He loved to hunt and fish and hike in the mountains. He could speak 4 languages. Well, he could curse in 4 languages, at least." Sam tucked the medallion and the tags under his shirt again. "He was the one who taught me how to trade. He did a good job," I said. Sam leaned his head against the window, his reflection only a sliver of a face in the shadows of the subway. His eyes were distant, his expression lost in thought. The shadow Sam had darker hair, black holes where the eyes were supposed to be. The strap of his bag was a band of shadow bisecting his chest before tapering off into nothingness. I carefully and quietly lifted my camera, angling the lens through the narrow space between my knees and his, and pushed the button, ungrateful that the rumble and clack of the train was loud enough to cover the click. Checking the back of his screen, I caught my breath. The image that flashed past me was quiet and honest and strangely intimate. I felt like I really had stolen part of Sam's soul, and there was a part of me that didn't want to give it back. We rode in an unexpectedly comfortable silence for another stop. After a new group of people had boarded the train, I knocked his knee with mine. "Hey, can I ask you a question?" I waited until Sam roused himself from his thoughts and settled back against his seat. "Is there anything you wouldn't trade away?" "No," Sam said instantly. "Everything is on the table. Everything is up for grabs." "Really?" I asked in suspicion and in surprise. "There's nothing you would keep for yourself? What about St. Christopher? You'd trade him?" "It only has value because I say it does. If something came along that I thought had more value, I'd trade it." I stared at him in disbelief. "You'd trade away a part of your past just like that?" He shrugged. "You've got to keep things moving. If leaving behind the past means you can have a better future, then sure, why not?" "Why not?" I repeated to myself. The answer dropped on me without invitation, because when all you have is the past, it's hard to let it go. My mom had left when I was 8. I had lived more than half my life without her, but she was still here, or still there, present in my mind and my memories. Even today, when I had promised myself I wouldn't think about her, I couldn't seem to let her go. Yes, it had been bad, those days and weeks and months before she had left, and the days and weeks and months after she'd left. But before that, there had been some good as well. That was what I wanted to hold on to, the good memories of my past, even if they sometimes felt more like a dream than a reality. I started slowly, wondering if Sam would believe what I was about to say. I wondered if I believed it. Sometimes it's okay to hold on to the good things, like your grandpa's medallion, and not trade everything. Sometimes it's okay to slow down and be still. Is that why you take pictures? He asked. I looked down at the camera where I cradled the captured image of Sam in my hands. Because when you take a picture, you can keep it forever. I hadn't ever thought about it like that before, but Sam was right. There was something comforting about knowing that once I had taken a picture, it wasn't going to change unless I changed it. I could keep it or delete it, but whatever I did with it, it was my decision, my choice. I was in control. So I have a question for you, he said. Yeah? My thoughts were filled with an assortment of fractured images, pieces of puzzles that didn't want to fit together. Which one are you? Which one of what? I asked, confused. Were you the one who left, or the one who was left behind? I swallowed hard, ignoring the rush of tears that threatened to surface. The subway slowed, and the automated voice announced that the next stop was Times Square. I stood up, my knees wobbling, and reached for the pole in the center of the floor. Adjusting my bag over my shoulder, I stared at the doors, willing them to open faster. I needed fresh air. I needed to be outside, up and away from the dark tunnels and the fake light and the questions that hurt to answer. When the train slid to a stop, Sam stood up, placing his hand next to mine on the pole. Sarah? I was left behind, I said, fast and quiet. The words tasted strange, hard-edged and metallic. I doubted I had ever spoken them aloud before. The tears I had struggled to keep at bay spilled over and raced down my cheeks. The doors split apart and I bolted from the train. Sam, Chapter 28. Sam's bag bounced on his hip as he ran after her. She was quick, darting and dodging through the crowds like a pinball set loose from its track. He knew how she felt. His own thoughts jumped from point to point, sometimes bouncing past, other times sliding away. The tags beneath his shirt chimed along with the metal rings and undone buckles on his bag. If he hadn't been so focused on Sarah, he might have paused to appreciate the music. She pounded up the stairs, her camera swinging from the wrist strap. Sarah, he called out, but she didn't stop. Shoving past a couple, walking hand in hand, he took the stairs two at a time. He reached out his hand but only brushed the trailing ends of her hair as she rounded the corner. Watch where you're going, a voice shouted, but Sam was already gone. That was his problem, he realized. He never watched where he was going. He only paid attention to where he was right now. If he had been able to see even a few steps ahead, he would have noticed how quiet Sarah had been on the train, how quickly she had grown introspective. Something heavy was weighing on her mind, but he had barged in and demanded to know her soul because that was what he was thinking about right now. He was thinking about what he wanted, not what she wanted, not what she needed. So much for being observant. He emerged from the subway station and was immediately assaulted by the sights and sounds of Times Square. There was a reason why he avoided the area as much as possible. Huge video screens lit up the night with a false dawn. Neon lights flickered in staccato accompaniment to the never-ending hum of conversation that filled the square. Cars inched their way through the narrow streets, crammed with pedestrians. For once, Sam was grateful for the countless tourists weighed down with shopping bags and maps and cameras. They had unwittingly created a wall that had stopped Sarah's flight. She stood on the corner, looking down both cross streets as though debating which way to go. He grabbed her elbow and spun her around to face him. Sarah, what's the... Tears streaked her face, and she brushed her free hand across her cheek. I can't, she choked out. Can't what? She shook her head. Sam kept his hand on her arm, partly because he didn't want her to bolt again, and partly because he liked the feel of her skin beneath his fingers. He took a deep breath and reminded himself to not only stay in the moment, but look forward just a little. Sarah, he said again, his voice soft, desperate with the roar of the crowd around him. Oh no, his voice soft despite the roar of the crowd around him. Why did you run? Gotta keep moving, right? She said with a lopsided smile. Not like that. Not when it's dangerous. The crowds parted and flowed around them. I knew where I was going, she said. The tears had dried on her face. He raised an eyebrow and shifted his back on his shoulder. I could have figured it out, she muttered. Which way's north? Sarah hesitated, then pointed in one direction. A moment later, she switched and pointed in another direction. His smile was gentle. He reached out and took her wrist, swinging her arm to point in a third direction. That's north. She pulled her hand from his grasp. She shifted her weight, kicking her hip out. And blew her hair off her face. So I don't want you to get lost. Now you sound like my dad. Maybe your dad has a point. She scrunched up her face. The only point he likes to make is that I'm not old enough to take care of myself. He touched her wrist. Is that such a bad thing? A shadow darkened her green eyes. I just meant, Sam hurried to explain. Is it so bad to have someone want to help take care of you? It can be nice to know that someone is in your corner looking out for you. You don't have to take care of yourself all by yourself. His words stumbled to a stop. He wasn't expressing himself very well. He could feel it. He tried to take back the words, turn them into something else. Back there. He jerked his head toward the bustling and brightly lit subway station. You said you had been left behind. I don't know that story. I don't expect you to tell me that story. But I know how it feels. I know that when I first saw you today, I recognized something about you. I thought then that we might have something in common, and I know now that we do. We're a lot alike, you and I. He took a breath. You haven't been abandoned. Someone still cares about you, your dad, even if it doesn't always seem like it. His hand slipped from her wrist to her fingers. You're not alone. The shadows in her face softened along with the corners of her mouth. Her fingers twitched, but she didn't withdraw. She held his gaze for a long time. You're not alone either, she said, her voice almost lost in the swirl of noise and lights. Paul cares about you and your parents, and I... Someone bumped into Sam from behind, jostling him forward. His hands flashed to Sarah's shoulders to keep him steady. He felt an electric zing pass through her and into him. His cheeks burned, but he didn't mind the heat. Sorry, he managed, stumbling back. He lowered his hands to his side, but they felt oddly heavy there. Useless. He rubbed his thumbs against his thighs and then shoved his hands into his pockets. Sarah's mouth moved, but a truck rumbled past, the horn blaring so he missed her words. He thought she said, I'm not, but he couldn't be sure. He didn't dare ask in case he was wrong. He didn't think he could survive making that kind of mistake again. Okay, we're gonna stop right there for tonight. We got quite a bit finished. We're almost done. I love this book so much. So I hope you are enjoying it. After hello. The story of Sam and Sarah. Okay. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.